Hello and welcome to this video and to June's book review, where we've got a lot to go through. I ended up reading like 8 books this month and I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Well, I went on holiday so I read 2 books. So there are 8 books to talk about, which is a lot for me. So I decided that I was going to take part in what Victoria Read's Summer Reading Challenge, and I'll put the link to the video explaining it down below. This is like my kind of reading challenge idea because it runs from the beginning of June till the end of August rather than just like for a week or whatever, because I tend to only read like 1 book a week. So having it run over 3 months means I have more chance of actually completing prompts, and as I said, either that's really spurred me on or it's just a fluke that it's happened. So the way that I'm doing it is I'm just reading what I would normally have read and then I'm finding the prompts to fit them into rather than planning a TBR around them. So without further ado, let's jump into the 8 books that I have to talk to you about. So the first book that I read this month was 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tillie. This was the book that I had planned to read on my holiday because I got the sequel for Christmas. So I wanted to get that one read before going into that. And I decided to put this into the Leanne Rose prompt. Sorry if I'm looking down, I've got it all down here. So the Leanne Rose prompt, which is to read a middle grade or a YA. And this is a YA sort of contemporary romance. We are following our main characters, whose names I've forgotten. Poppy, and I think it's pronounced Rune. He's Norwegian. So we're following them. Runa moves over to America, lives next door, and then from there they become best friends and then a couple, and then they go through a lot of adversity because Poppy is diagnosed with cancer, and it's about their story essentially. I ended up giving this book 4.5, but I keep toying whether I should bump it up to a 5. Because this is, from my memory, the only book to ever make me cry. Like actual physical tears. I don't really get particularly emotional about books, but I did with this one. So I was sat on the balcony sort of blubbing away, reading this on holiday, and it wasn't really because of Poppy and Runa, it was because of the parents. And the way that the parents dealt with that situation with their children and the relationships that the parents had, and how that all went and what they were saying, that's what really got me. Lots of people say that this is a sad book and it makes them cry, but I'm not sure that's the same reason for everyone, but it was for me. But the reason I haven't given it 5 stars is because there were so many moments in it that I found it kind of cringe. I thought that their relationship was a bit too intense maybe, and yeah, there were just lots of moments that made me cringe, which makes me think I can't give it 5 stars, but then also it made me cry, and I don't think I've ever cried at a book before. So that's why it's 4.5, and possibly the best book that I've read this year so far. But a couple of other things that have also meant that I wasn't sure I could give it a 5 star was the chapters were so long. Like, if you want to read a quick chapter, this isn't the book for you. They are some hefty things. Thankfully there are breaks so you can just stop in the middle of them, but I hate doing that. I like to finish a chapter, but these were just too long at points to do it in. And also there was like a bonus chapter in the Kindle version that I read, which I don't really see the point of, because it comes where the book ends, like the epilogue. This bonus chapter comes before that. And I don't really see the point. Again, it was long because it's a long chapter, and I think it's only there as a setup to this book. So I didn't really see the point of that. I also wasn't a huge fan of the epilogue, but that's besides the point. So yeah, I did really enjoy it, and as I said, it really did pull on my heartstrings and invoke a lot of emotion in me. The story itself is very much your 2010s, early 2000s child cancer story. Fault of My Stars, I'm Looking at You, that kind of aspect. I've read a few, weirdly kind of like them, so it really does fit into what was going on at the time for those. But yeah, there's just that sort of flip-flop I've got for my rating, because on one hand there were things that really did irritate me and make me cringe, but then obviously I've never cried at a book. Have I said that already? So yeah, that was 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tillie Cole. I then had a couple of days left of the holidays, so I thought I'd read something quick. So the shortest book on my Kindle, and one of those ones that I've been trying to get through before I lose them because my Kindle's dying, was Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I can never remember where the L is in that man's name, but him, the author of 5 People You Meet in Heaven. Again, fitting this to the prompt, I went with Abbey of Pelennor, which is to read a non-fiction, because this is a memoir essentially of Mitch's time going back to converse with his old college university lecturer while he is also dying of an illness. I don't know why I picked death books and cancer books and sick books for my holiday reads, but I did. So there we go. So this is essentially him going to see a professor that he hadn't seen for a long time. He'd lost contact, but then heard that he was ill, so went to visit him every Tuesday, hence it's Tuesdays with Morrie. Morrie is his lecturer, and they discuss lots of things, and he's recording it. And it's sort of a look at life and death and sort of everything in between, family, love, all of that stuff. I gave this book 3.5 stars because some of it was interesting, and I do like the writing style. I found it very accessible, but a lot of it was a bit tedious, I suppose. It wasn't something that I did really like their friendship, and I think that's what gave it that sort of half star. It did feel very 3-star, but their friendship bumped it up a bit. Morrie talks in a lot of, I guess, affirmations, and that's never really quite my style. But on the whole, it was a good enough book. 3.5 stars. Short enough to fit into the sort of end of my holiday. And yeah, that was Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. You can see his name. So coming back, I knew that I had my sort of oldest book that I didn't read in May. I mentioned it there that I read 2 book club books, so I was going to have to read 2 older books on my TBR this month, or the 2 oldest books on my book TBR this month. So the first of those was I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston, and the prompt that I used for this one was Literary Diversions prompt, and that is to read a queer book. So in this we are following Chloe, who is a bisexual woman, hence the queer, who along with 2 others kissed Shara Wheeler, and then Shara disappears at their prom, and they are searching for her. This is all set within the sort of Bible Belt of America, so obviously that plays a large part to it. I gave this book 3 stars. I sort of didn't see the point to it. I read it and I was like, I don't get why this has been written. It felt very much like 2 different books squished together. So the first half of it, we are essentially doing a scavenger hunty kind of thing set by Shara to try and find her. The second half is all around like a protest against the school and graduation. I won't say any more than that to try not to spoil anything. But the 2 bits sort of didn't really mix, but they did. But yeah, I wasn't sure. It's just like 2 books squished together. The main issue is I really didn't like Chloe or Shara. Both of those really just got on my nerves, and I didn't want to read from them. I really like some of the other characters. So she's doing this like scavenger hunty thing with 2 guys, Smith and Rory. I would have preferred to read from them, or from like her best friend Georgia, or basically anybody else in this book other than Chloe and Shara. And as those are the 2 sort of main characters in this book, you get a lot from them. So that's probably my biggest gripe with it, is I just didn't like them. It does obviously have some good representation because we have varying differences in sexuality, and as it's June and Pride Month, it was a good book to pick up for that. And then added, as I said, with the setting and the talk of sin and all of that kind of stuff, because they go to a very religious school. That gives you a different kind of backdrop to your sort of standard queer romance that of types that I've read before. So it does have its sort of good points to it, but because I really disliked our narrator, our main characters, I just couldn't really get on board with it. So unfortunately, 3 stars for me. I'm going to be unhauling this one. So that's I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. And my first Casey McQuiston. I know people love Red, White and Royal Blue, but I'm not sure I will be picking that one up. Amongst that, I was also listening to an audiobook, so I was listening to The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. I've got, you can't see them because they're here, I've read I'll Stop and Love Square, and then I have Love Struck on my TBRs. This is like the middle one that I don't own, and I saw it on my library app and thought, cool, I'll give that a go. It's a nice summery seasonal read, which links me to the prompt because it's 155 books and to read a seasonal read. So I thought it fit well. So as I said, I listened to this on audiobook. It's narrated by Carrie Hope Fletcher? I went all like Australian there, or South African or whatever. It's narrated by Carrie Hope Fletcher, which, as you saw, I saw her recently in Calamity Jane, so I will link that video up for you. But to begin with, I found it a little bit distracting having her as the narrator, because I obviously have watched her for a number of years and know her voice pretty well, so found it hard to begin with to take her out of the story and just have the story. In this we are following, what's her name, Annie, as she is jilted at the altar, but her in-laws have paid for the honeymoon and basically tell her to go on it. So in the lead up to that, she reconnects with someone that she used to go to theatre camp with back when she was like 14 and hasn't seen him since then. So she ends up taking Patrick with her on this honeymoon because there's 2 tickets, and they head off to Australia, and it goes from there. I really like Patrick as a character. I found him very interesting. I liked his sort of mannerisms and that kind of stuff. Annie as a character, I also enjoyed her, although slightly less, but I did like the fact that the story was a lot of her exploring herself and reinventing and refining herself, which I found interesting, certainly as I was of a similar age and that kind of stuff. They obviously travel to Australia, and I love a book that has a bit of travel in it, certainly to places that I've been, but would have liked to have actually heard about Australia a bit more, because some of the stuff that they did or said in it, you could have been anywhere, and if you're gonna be very specific about where you're going, make your details and stuff specific so that the reader can feel like they're there too. I thought I liked the romance and how that developed, and I thought that was a reasonable time frame for it to develop in. However, obviously there is a 3rd act breakup, and I did want that to hurry along a little bit more. I thought that was drawn out a little bit too much. And the epilogue for me was, again, a little bit pointless, because it wasn't far enough in the future for it to warrant an epilogue. It was basically like 3 weeks after the end of the book or whatever, and I thought, nah, you need to be further along than that. Maybe I misunderstood it, but that was my thought on it. So I enjoyed a lot of it, so I gave it a 4 stars, but obviously there were elements of it that weren't quite up there for me. But as a summary romance and one of those sort of what people call a palate cleanser, and I don't really like that terminology, but an easy summary romance to read, it was a good one. I wouldn't be rushing to buy a copy for my shelves, but I'm glad I've read it, listened to it, so I knew what was going on. So that was The Lucky Escape by Laura Jane Williams. As you know, I am reading, I'm trying to continue a series each month, and I'm currently in the Bridgerton sphere. So I read the 3rd Bridgerton, which is An Offer for a Gentleman. This is Benedict's story, and as a prompt, I wasn't quite sure where I was going to put it, but I've settled on, but it might change, with Gloria and the Never-Ending TBR and a backlist book, because this was published in like 2001. Is that right? Yeah, 2001. So backlist, and certainly backlist for this author as well. So I thought that seemed kind of fitting for this. As I said, this is Benedict's story, so we're following how he finds a wife and all of that kind of stuff. I think this is probably my favourite Bridgerton, possibly. I gave it 3.5, which is basically what I've given all of them so far. And I think the reason I liked it is because I didn't know where it was going. For the first 2 books I have seen the series that are linked to them, so I had a better understanding of where we were going, although obviously these are very formulaic, so you know really where they're going, but you don't know the intricacies of it. So the fact that there hasn't been a series for this one and I haven't seen it yet, I think it's the next one coming, it worked for me. However, the first 4 chapters are just a retelling of Cinderella, which is what I'd heard of this book, was that it was a retelling of Cinderella, so I was a little bit apprehensive going into it. But it is just the 4 chapters, but they are basically Cinderella to a T. But then obviously the rest of it goes in a slightly different place, which is good, and I was glad of that. Benedict, however, is not my favourite brother, favourite character, favourite Bridgerton. I found him, basically he should have just accepted what her decisions were and her reasonings for it. She knows what she wants it, but he basically wanted to wear her down, which just didn't sit very well with me. Just accept her. And yeah, that's where it didn't sit well for me. But however, Sophie might be my favourite female character in it. Obviously we've had Daphne and Kate, neither of which seem to have much of a, I don't know, gumption, is that the right word? Whereas Sophie knows her own mind and she was going to stick to it. That's where we are with that. I did like it. It was a easy, fun read as always. The end of this book, however, I think it's going to be brilliant in the series when they do eventually make it. But again, 3.5, won't be keeping it on my shelf, but I'm glad I'm making my way through the series, and we are on to Colin's story next, which I believe is series 3, but I've not watched it because I knew I had the books. So I've held off, and I'm glad I have, because obviously I enjoyed the 3rd one more because I haven't seen it and I don't know where it's going. So that's coming next month. The next book I read was purely because I'm doing this challenge and I thought I can get it from the library and it's gonna tick off a thing and I'll be able to read it quickly. So the next book that I read was Bloom. This is by, and I need to look at the names because I can't remember it, Kevin Panetta. He wrote it with Savannah Ganshell, I think I pronounce it, but that's probably wrong. She illustrated it, and I read this solely for the reading challenge because it's Gavin Reads It All prompt, which is to read a manga or a graphic novel. Originally I wanted to read Garlic and the Witch, but they didn't have that at the library, whereas they had Bloom, so I requested that, got it really quickly, read it in a day. It's a male-male romance. It's set in America by the coast. There's a lot of baking involved. It's Heartstopper-esque, but I wouldn't say it's as good. I gave it 3.5 stars. I really liked the baking elements in it. I thought that was fun. I thought the illustrations were really beautiful, and really liked that style. But I just struggle to connect with a graphic novel. I think because you go through it so quickly, you just can't build that kind of relationship with characters or anything like that, so I struggle with them. I also found with this one that I kept thinking I'd missed pages because there just seemed to be this jump in time which just wasn't there, so I kept flicking back and trying to see if I'd missed pages, but I hadn't. It's just the way that it was, so I didn't like that element of it. That's sort of all I have to say about it. I find graphic novels a bit hard to review, I suppose, because although I know what the story is, I'm not connected to it very much. So yeah, that was Bloom, and that was my graphic novel for the month. I then had another audiobook. I picked this up just because it was available now, and again it's on my Kindle, so it's one I was trying to get through, and that's The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorn. This is a weird prompt to put it in, but I didn't know where else to put it. I've linked it to Pretty Purple Polka Dots prompt, which is an international author, because obviously Nathaniel Hawthorn was an American. However, this was published in like 1850, so he is long gone by now. I didn't get on well with this one. I gave it 2 stars. I struggle with classics anyway. I thought maybe listening to it on audio would help, and it probably did. I'm not sure I would have. I think it would have taken me an incredibly long time if I'd read it physically. Certainly because like the first hour or so of the audiobook was just this chapter called Customs House, which was just a load of drivel, and it sort of set the tone from then on. So this is a classic. This is the story of Hester Prynne, who is, I guess, condemned of adultery and is told that she has to wear a scarlet A on her chest forever so that people know that she is a sinner, because we're based in New England and the Puritans and all of that kind of stuff. Weirdly, it did have some similar themes to this book, even though they are written many years apart. However, I just found that it dragged and it was tedious, and yeah, I just didn't really get on with it. I did like Pearl, the daughter. I thought she was quite a fun character, but she doesn't appear very often. But the rest of it wasn't really for me. The narrator, who I don't actually have the name of, they never said it, but the way that they did Chillingworth, he sounded like Herr Bish from My Dad Wrote a Porno, so that was a bit difficult for me. Very different stories, very different stories, but they had very similar voices. Oh, the door's just shut. They had very similar voices, so yeah. Scarlet Letter, I've done it. I always thought I might enjoy it, so that's why I've always been intrigued. I wasn't really a fan, gave it 2 stars, and there's that one. And let's move on to The First Thing About You, which has a horrible cover because I can never read it. I can when it's on camera, but if I'm like that, I really struggle. This is by Chaz Hayden. I've used this for the Chloe Reads Books prompts to read a romance because the tagline is a classic boy in a wheelchair meets a girl love story. This is following Harris. Harris has SMA, so spinal muscular atrophy? I'm not sure, I can't remember entirely. So obviously it gives an interesting perspective for a romance, and Chaz Hayden has the same condition, so it is very much own voices. A lot of the things that Harris has gone through, I imagine Chaz went through. Obviously all of the medical sides of things he knows about because he has to do it, so that does give it a very interesting perspective. However, again, Harris as a character I wasn't a big fan of. I found him, and not because of the disability, just in general, I just found him to be, he was very much just into himself. He's very selfish in his way of looking at things and the way he treats people, and that didn't sit very well with me. Although he does go through some growth through the book, so I guess that's a redeeming factor. But because of that, I do think that Xander and Morrie in this book deserve much better. And the relationship that he has with his nurse Miranda, some would see it as a bit problematic. Reading it, I didn't find it quite so much. I mean, there were points where I was like, I don't think your nurse would do that, but then she's not qualified. Not that that excuses anything. So yeah, some would find that relationship problematic. I didn't mind it quite so much. So it's an easy read. I read it pretty quickly. It's a YA, so that's why it reads pretty quick. But I wouldn't say it's particularly groundbreaking in terms of what it explores. It does have a unique perspective, as I said, because I don't often read romances, certainly from disabled people. I'd like to do more of it. I do have one on here. So that was interesting and eye-opening in some aspects. But the actual story and the tropes that were chosen were very typical of a teen novel. So that is The First Thing About You by Chaz Hayden. I'm not going to show you my best and worst. I think you can probably guess from the video because I'm having real problems with my camera battery. So I'm going to end this video here. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't, please go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!